Hello and namaste. Welcome to the COVID Care series presented by Apollo Hospitals. This is Dr. Srinidhi Chidambaram. I hope you've all been staying well and safe during this pandemic, and I do hope that you're finding our series useful and informative. We bring you this series mainly to address the most crucial and critical aspects of COVID-19 so that you can get factual and useful information amidst all the myths and misconceptions and rumors that surround COVID-19. One of the most talked about issues which you see everywhere around you these days is the treatment. That is, the medicines that are used, what kind of prescriptions are created to treat COVID-19. We talk about all kinds of names without really understanding when and why they are used. So we talk about oxygen and steroid and remdesivir and plasma therapy, azithromycin, ivermectin, all kinds of things, not to mention all the alternative forms of treatment. But the key thing to understand always is that all medications are not needed for all COVID-19 patients, and many need nothing but rest, hydration, and some paracetamol. So no need to panic and get confused about medications. All you need to do is to place your trust in your treating doctor and go through the protocol of COVID treatment and take what is meant for the severity of your condition, your infection. To discuss this and to give us his expert advice, I am delighted to welcome Associate Professor Dr. Lakshman G. Jasani, Consultant Infectious Diseases at Apollo Hospitals, Navi Mumbai. He has a rich experience of over 10 years in this field. Dr. Lakshman G. Jasani completed his MBBS from the Grant Medical College, Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, Nashik. He then went on to pursue his DNB from the Apollo BGS Hospital, Mysore. He also completed a fellowship in the Royal Society of Public Health, London, also honored with membership in the MNAMS, New Delhi. Dr. Lakshman Jasani also has trained in general and transplant infectious diseases at Detroit Medical Center, US. He is a founder member of the Infectious Diseases and Infection Control Forum, Mumbai, and an organizing committee member, faculty and speaker of the quarterly certificate course on basics in infection control. He's also a member of several associations like the lifetime member of the Association of Physicians of India, member of the Clinical Infectious Disease Society of India, and also the US. Hello, doctor, and welcome to the COVID Care series. We are all eagerly looking forward to your insights on prescription during COVID-19 infection. So I request you to give us an overview, after which we will take some questions on the various medications that should or should not be used to treat COVID-19.
Namaste and very good afternoon, dear friends. So today what we are going to discuss is a very
Over to you, doctor.
Yeah. So today what we are going to discuss is a very important topic about know your prescription. By that we mean that you should know what are the medications that a person who is suffering from COVID should take and what are the medications that person should not take. So to understand that, first we have to see whether the patient is really having COVID or not. So when do we suspect a patient having COVID infection is if the patient is showing certain signs and symptoms. Now what are these signs and symptoms? Fever, dry cough, fatigue, that is easy tiredness, breathing difficulty, any upper respiratory tract symptoms like running nose, nasal stuffiness, sinusitis, any of those symptoms. And of course, to see whether the patient is developing any breathlessness, that is breathing difficulty, which suggests that the infection is going from upper respiratory tract to lower respiratory tract. In addition to that, if the patient is having loose motions, that also can be a symptom of COVID-19. So if the patient presents with any of these symptoms, but predominantly fever, respiratory tract symptoms, and tiredness, one should suspect that the patient is going to have COVID-19. So what should such a person do? Such a person should go and visit their doctor. The doctor, when he sees the patient having these symptoms, then suspects COVID-19 infection and then categorizes the patient into different categories. So there are three categories in which the patients are subdivided. One is category A, that is mild infection, category B, that is moderate infection, and category C, which is the severe infection. So if a patient has only mild signs and symptoms, not severe disease, he is categorized as category A. And again, we divide category A into two parts, one without risk factors and the other is with risk factors. So what are the risk factors that we look into? The risk factors are basically if you are having diabetes, if you are having blood pressure, if you are having cardiac problems, lung problems, liver problems, kidney problems, those are your risk factors. So we divide into two categories, and then these two patients are treated only symptomatically. So when we say you have a mild infection, that means your symptoms are not severe and your oxygen saturation is above 95% and maintaining at room air. And even if you do some exercise or exertion, the oxygen saturation does not drop below 94%. So these patients are given symptomatic treatment. When we say symptomatic treatment, what is the treatment that we offer? The treatment is offered like paracetamol for fever, maybe some analgesics, maybe some cold medications for the cough and cold, maybe some cough suppressants or cough expectorants for the cough, that's all. And in addition to that, maybe a few multivitamins like vitamin C or zinc can be offered to these patients. So these mild patients, the course will last for anywhere between 7 to 10 days and they will recover after that and there will be no problem. There is no role of giving any antivirals, there is no role of any steroids, there is no role of any anticoagulants at this point of time. So patient with mild symptoms will recover over a period of 7 to 10 days. The second category is the category B, which is the moderate category. Now, these are the patients whom the saturation is dropping below 94%, but still it maintains above 90%. So those patients who are having hypoxia, that is drop in saturation, but maintaining saturation between 90 to 94, or they require oxygen up to 5 liters per minute, are categorized as category B. Now, these are the patients whom probably remdesivir, that an antiviral agent, may be helpful. Since these patients have hypoxia, these are the patients will need steroids, either dexamethasone or prethylprednisone, and also they will require prophylactic anticoagulations. So category B patients are the patients who have to be managed in hospital. They can be managed in the wards. They don't need ICU. So just has to be observed over a period of 7 to 10 days and see how they progress. If they progress to category C, we have to treat them that way. Or if they improve, they are categorized as category A further. And the third category, the most severe category, is category C, in which the patient does not maintain saturation, oxygenation level falls below 90%, the oxygen requirement is more than 5 liters per minute, the patient may require some non-invasive ventilation and even further may progress to require mechanical ventilation. So this is the most severe category, category C patients. Now these are the patients who will definitely require steroids, they will require therapeutic doses of anticoagulants. Remdesivir may or may not help in these category of patients. We do not know, much more data is needed on this. But as such now the data suggests that remdesivir is probably not such useful in category C patients. And of course, these patients may require immunomodulators like tocilizumab or baricitinib. These immunomodulators may be required. So these are the three different categories. So in your routine OPD practice, you may only see category A patient mild symptoms, which require symptomatic treatment. If they worsen to category B, they need to be admitted and treated with steroids. And category C, if they are worsening even further, they may require mechanical ventilation.
Thank you, doctor. And we will just I will just discuss some questions with you, and then by the time we will also take some questions from our viewers. So these are some of the questions that have already come to us. So I will just go through some of them. So as you already discussed, we were talking about dexamethasone and remdesivir. So the question is that are they both used for at the same time for COVID-19 patients?
Yeah. So remdesivir injection is used basically for category B, that is moderate patients who are having slight amount of hypoxia. But the remdesivir has to be given in the first 10 days of the illness. As we know the progression of the illness starts with viremia to begin with, then it goes into an inflammatory phase. So when the patient is in the viremic phase, when the virus is replicating a lot, that is in the first 10 days of the illness, that is the time when remdesivir is useful and it works very well because it decreases the viral load of the patient. So remdesivir, if at all it has to be given, it has to be given in category B patients and to be given in the first 10 days of the illness. The second question is, when is the steroids to be used? So any point of time during the patient illness, if the patient develops hypoxia, that is saturation falls below 94%, that is the indication to use steroids. So it is very important to make note that steroids are not to be used for mild cases, because in mild cases patients do not have hypoxia, they do not require steroids. Only in moderate to severe cases when there is hypoxia, that is the time when steroids like dexamethasone or methylprednisolone needs to be used.
Doctor, we also hear about people being given steroid sprays sometimes. So I just wanted to ask you about what is the role of those sprays and at what time, because we do hear about inappropriate use of steroids and that leading to fungal infections. So could you enlighten us about
Yeah.
the dangers of self-medication and inappropriate and where steroid sprays do have a role?
Yeah, so I'm sure the WhatsApp University gives a lot of messages regarding the usage of steroids, which one should not use at all. So remember that steroids are to be used only when there is hypoxia. If there is no hypoxia, there is no role of steroids. Then there are some formulations which come in the form of steroids with some bronchodilators, which can be given in the nasal mucosa. So those are the symptomatic treatments. So if you have a stuffiness of the nose or if you have nose block, maybe those times steroid sprays in combination with other beta agonists can be given as a nasal spray for symptomatic relief. But as a routine protocol, if you do not have hypoxia, please do not use steroids. They cause more harm than good.
Could you discuss the role of ivermectin in the treatment of COVID-19?
Yeah. So you have hit a very controversial topic regarding the role of ivermectin in COVID-19. So if we go by the scientific evidence and evidence-based medicine, there is no randomized controlled trial which has shown that the ivermectin works. In fact, all the trials, in fact, the company who manufactures ivermectin, that is the MSD itself, have claimed that ivermectin is not to be used for COVID-19 infection. Recently, the WHO came out with a statement saying that ivermectin has not been proven therapy for COVID-19 infection. But unfortunately, there are various guidelines, including the ICMR guidelines and Ministry.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's there in our many
Yeah,
of the state
even
guidelines as
yeah,
well.
yes. Even in some of the state guidelines, the ivermectin, doxycycline, azithromycin are being prescribed for mild to moderate patients. But if you ask me scientifically, there is no evidence that the ivermectin works. So I would suggest that taking these medicines are of no use. The only use of ivermectin is basically if the patient is going to be on steroids. That time to prevent strongyloids hyperinfection, which is a parasitic infection, to prevent them, a single or two doses of ivermectin is sufficient, and after that it should be stopped. But role of ivermectin as an anti-COVID agent is not proven, and we should not support the use of it.
Last time during the first wave, we were talking about this Fabiflu a lot. I don't seem to hear it much now, but what is the role of Fabiflu, doctor, in
Yeah.
this?
So Fabiflu, again, like the ivermectin, we do not have many studies going for it. But Fabiflu, what is called as the Favipiravir, is basically an antiviral agent. Now, there are some studies, especially from Japan, which have shown that Favipiravir can help in the clearance of the viremia very rapidly. So, if at all the Favipiravir has to be used, it has to be used in the early part of the illness. But as I told you, since there is no large randomized controlled trial, we cannot say that Favipiravir is actually effective. There is another school of thought which suggests that maybe you can give favipiravir for the mild amount of cases to help clearing of the viremia. That can be argued upon. But in general, favipiravir does not have any much role in the treatment of COVID-19 infection.
And what about doxycycline? And of course, we spoke about azithromycin, but some people also give doxy.
Yes, yes. So doxycycline and azithromycin are antibiotics, and as we know, COVID-19 is a viral disease. So definitely these antibiotics do not work. Both doxycycline and azithromycin has some immunomodulatory properties due to which probably it is being prescribed. But as I told you again, we do not have any randomized controlled trial, large-scale study which shows that doxycycline and azithromycin works. So even though it is being prescribed by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare guidelines and ICMR guidelines, there is no scientific evidence for it, and I would suggest that we should avoid unnecessary usage of doxy and azithromycin. Moreover, we are only going to promote antibiotic resistance further.
And also this, we were talking about chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine
Yeah.
also. We don't
Yes.
hear much in this season, but that
Yes.
was another thing which was
Yes,
there.
so hydroxychloroquine received a lot of attention in the last year during the first wave of pandemic, and there were some studies which showed its benefit. But there was a large-scale study which was done, which clearly showed that hydroxychloroquine does not benefit in mortality. It does not help in the reduction of the severity of disease. Does not decrease the duration of the illness. So overall consensus now is that hydroxychloroquine does not work. We should not use it. And if anyone is using it, probably they have to keep a watch on the side effects as well. Another important point is if hydroxychloroquine is used with remdesivir, it actually decreases the efficacy of remdesivir. So in any ways, hydroxychloroquine is not that effective and one should stop using it.
This is again something about steroids. We did talk about it, but I think this is about also like, does it actually help in people who have very severe COVID-19, and how does it help really? Because we know that it's being given even for the category B and even for the severe people. So are there different methods of action in each one of these?
Yeah, so we have to understand where do the steroids have a place in COVID-19 treatment. So whenever there is hypoxia, that is the patient is having drop in the saturation, that shows that the patient has inflammation in the lungs. And it is because of this inflammation in the lungs, the pneumonia which is occurring, that is the reason why the oxygen levels are dropping. So steroids have an immunomodulatory property, and that is why steroids act well in the inflammatory phase of the disease. So in the initial part of the disease, steroids have no role. When the patient goes into the inflammatory part of the disease, when there is a lot of inflammation, steroids have a role in that, when especially when the patient is going into hypoxemia. So hypoxia starts with category B patients, so definitely we use steroids. And then when the patient goes on to go to category C patients, that is the time when there is severe hypoxemia, again steroids have a role. So overall, the role of steroids is basically in hypoxemic patients when they are in the inflammatory stage of the disease, and it helps in reducing the inflammation, thereby improving the oxygenation of the patient.
I think this is a very important awareness to create, because there is so much of talk today about the mucormycosis that a lot of people seem to think that, the moment somebody says steroid, no, they should not have it at all, because, and also there is a concern among diabetic patients also who are on steroids about how it will alter their sugar levels. Is it still safe to take it?
Yeah. So because steroids show such a good action against the COVID-19 infection in category B, category C patients, we have seen overzealous use of steroids. So we have seen patients when the doctors have prescribed excessive amount of steroids to patient. Now what happens is when you give high dose of steroids for prolonged period of time, there is hyperglycemia. That is, there is high amount of sugar in the blood. And when there is high amount of sugar in the blood, and because mucormycosis is a ubiquitous organism, it is present everywhere, and it is get attracted to high amount of glucose. So whenever there is high amount of glucose, the fungus gets attracted to it, and then it causes mucormycosis, what we call as the black fungus. That is what mucormycosis is. So when you use high amount of steroids, it will cause high glucose. High glucose will lead to mucormycosis. So that is the chain. So we have to break the chain. We should not use high amount of steroids, but that does not mean we should not use steroids at all. So again, if your patient is hypoxemic and if you don't give steroids, probably we are not giving the standard care of treatment to that patient. So one has to be very judicious in the use of steroids, give proper dosage of steroids. That is also very important. Overzealous use of steroids will cause more complications like mucormycosis.
In other words, I think, the patient and the family will have to leave it to the treating doctor to decide what is best for that patient instead
Yes,
of second guessing and trying to, because everybody's journey in COVID is different.
absolutely.
Um, this one is about, when is the ideal time to go for the RT-PCR test in the once one has any risk of COVID-19?
Yeah. So patients who are symptomatic, that is the patients who have symptoms like fever, cough, cold, coryza, breathing difficulty, these patients will definitely have the COVID virus infection in the respiratory tract. So as soon as you are symptomatic, you can go ahead and do the RT-PCR test, which in all probability would come as positive. The question arises when you should do RT-PCR in asymptomatic patients. So patients who are asymptomatic and patients who do not have any symptoms, but they come in contact with a COVID positive patient. Now, these patients can do the RT-PCR maybe after 48 to 72 hours, and then the results can be positive. But for symptomatic patient, do RT-PCR right up front. For asymptomatic patient, you can wait for a few days and then do the RT-PCR.
We have also, what can a patient who's awaiting admission or who's at home do to improve oxygen levels, or how can they manage at home? Because now there is also a paucity of beds in many places.
Yes, yes.
So if
So
even if they are in category B and they have to be at home, what should they really do? How should they take medical care?
correct. So patients who are hypoxemia, that is category B patients, if they're admitted in the hospital and later then they are discharged, and even after discharge, we see many patients whose oxygen saturation falls below 94, but is still above 90. So what can be done for such particular patients? One option is to keep home oxygen. That is, you have an oxygen concentrator or oxygen cylinder at home and keep a low level of oxygen, that is 1 to 2 liters per minute. Second thing is doing the breathing exercises like pranayam or do other breathing exercises. You can make use of spirometry, that is the exercise with the balls. You can just do inhalation and expiration of this exercise can be done. Fourth is basically prone positioning. So patients who are having hypoxemia, they should slide down with their stomach or the belly touching to the bed. That is in a prone position, because that helps in the recruitment of those part of the lungs which are not used. So that helps in improvement of saturation. So using of breathing exercises, spirometry, prone positioning, and home oxygen, these are the measures which patients can use to improve their oxygenation.
How do you monitor the oxygen level at home, and how many times should I do it in a day?
Yeah. So if the patients are belonging to category B or is category A or category A with risk factors, these are the patients whose saturation do not drop. But we always suggest these patients that keep monitoring your saturation, because we want to see whether these patients progress from category A to category B or not. So a home pulse oximeter, which is readily available, you can make use of that. And we now need to check their saturation every 4 to 6 hourly. If there is a drop of saturation less than 94%, alarm your doctor and get admitted. If the saturation is maintaining above 94%, nothing to worry. Just keep monitoring your saturation every 4th hourly or 6th hourly.
What is the role of the blood tests in COVID? Because there is some confusion as to when these tests, which tests, because some do everything ranging from CBC to D-dimer to ferritin, but some only suggest to do CBC and CRP. And also, at what stage should it be done, and should it be repeated
Yeah.
also?
So if you are belonging to category A patient, that is mild cases, actually speaking, no blood tests are necessary, because these are just symptomatic treatments. Stay at home, stay well hydrated, and just use supportive treatment. So they do not need any blood test. But if the patients are there with category A with certain risk factors like diabetes, blood pressure, etc., these patients, if you want to know whether their inflammatory markers are high, we can send certain blood tests like CBC, CRP, D-dimer, ferritin. Now, this is not to alarm the patient that they are having a severe problem. This is just to look into it whether the patient are progressing from progressive A category A to category B or not. But whenever the patient is there in category B, that is the patient is admitted in the hospital, they will require an entire battery of tests, which include the sugar test, the liver function test, the kidney profile, CRP, D-dimer, ferritin, 2D echo, and of course a chest X-ray as well. These are the investigation which will be required for category B patients, and of course for category C patients as well. So, as a thumb rule, mild cases, no investigations. If you're getting admitted in hospital, we do these tests.
So for the category A, if they have already pre-existing comorbid conditions, then should we do the blood tests or?
Yes, yes. You can do a blood test more to see the progress, whether the patient is progressing to category B or not. In that way, it is helpful.
And which day should it be done, doctor?
Yeah, so tests have to be done right upfront when the patient presents to you for the first time. If the results are abnormal, for example, if the D dimers are very elevated, now D dimer is a very tricky test. We do not know how reliable this D dimer test is. So if the D dimers are elevated on day one, maybe you can just keep a watch and repeat a D dimer test maybe after day 3 or day 4 to see the trend. Because if the D dimers at an increasing trend, we may need to consider giving anticoagulation. But if the D dimers come down over a period of time, there's nothing needs to be done. It's just observation which is needed.
Again, the similar question is about the test CT, because again, there is a lot of confusion about it. So do we need it or we don't need it, or do we need to take it in a particular day? Some people take it too early, too late.
Yes.
So what would be the?
Yeah. So first of all, please understand the CT scan has to be prescribed by a doctor, and the patient should not go themselves and do the CT scan. We are seeing a lot of trend these days that patients are doing the RT-PCR test CT scan on their own, and then they bring the report to the doctor and show that look at it and tell us what is it. So remember, CT scan is only to be done by the prescription of a doctor. CT scans are not routinely indicated at all in any patients. So as I told you in category A patients, even a chest X-ray may not be needed, or if at all there is risk factors, then maybe you can do some blood test and chest X-ray. But if the patient is having an RT-PCR persistently negative, but still the patient has symptoms, that is where the role of CT scan is there. So if a patient has symptoms of COVID-19, but he comes with an RT-PCR report negative, and you suspect clinically that the patient is having symptoms, that is the time when you ask the patient to do a CT scan. The second indication for a CT scan is if you are to look for any complications of complications of COVID-19. For example, if the patient is having COVID, but suddenly he develops again high-grade fever, or he develops some new symptoms like breathlessness, you want to see what is going on in the chest. That is the time when you can ask to do a CT scan. And of course, CT scan can be done at much later date for to look for any long-term complications like pulmonary fibrosis. That is the time CT scan needs to be done. So there are very specific indications to do CT scan. Routine use of CT scan should be totally avoided, as it is not necessary, and unnecessary exposure to radiation is occurring.
So now we will take some questions, Doctor, from our live audience. So the first one is, can we give the vaccine to a kidney transplant patient?
Yes. So a kidney transplant patient who is not on severe immunosuppression, he can take the vaccine. So there is no contraindication to take the vaccine. There is no harm caused by the vaccine. But if the patient is on severe immunosuppressions during the early part of kidney transplantation, you take the vaccine, the body will not mount an immune response. So in speaking that, it means that basically the vaccine is going as a waste. So if the patient is post-transplant, but not in the initial part of transplantation, in the later part of transplant where the immunosuppression is low, he can go ahead and take the vaccine. The vaccine will definitely protect him.
Please suggest medicines for category 2 patients, but we have already discussed, I think he means category B perhaps.
Yeah. So category B patients are patients who are hypoxemic, so definitely they'll require steroids. Category B patients are good candidates to start for remdesivir, which is an antiviral agent. But again, it has to be started within the first 7 to 10 days of the symptoms. And third is basically the prophylactic anticoagulation. That is basically either a low molecular weight heparin, which needs to be given, or an unfractionated heparin that needs to be given. So steroids, remdesivir, and basically prophylactic anticoagulation. These are the three main agents which needs to be given in category B patients. And in addition, if you are suspecting a superadded infection, then maybe antibiotics needs to be added.
Yeah, we already discussed this, but can ivermectin and Predmet be used together from day one?
So I told you the only indication for ivermectin is to prevent strongyloids hyperinfection. So if a patient is going to be on steroids, you just give him 2 doses of ivermectin, that is to take care of strongyloids. So we are using ivermectin as a prophylactic agent for parasitic infection, but not as a treatment for COVID-19 infection.
Is there any particular side effect in a diabetic patient who takes remdesivir?
So remdesivir is pretty safe. The only side effects are some gastrointestinal side effects or elevation of transaminases, that is their liver enzymes. So even a patient is diabetic and category B and presents in the first 7 to 10 days of the illness, having fever and those symptoms, remdesivir will be beneficial in this particular group of patients.
Doctor, how can we differentiate between mild and moderate in a person who already has a risk factor like high BP or diabetes?
So if a patient is having risk factors, we have to see whether they belong to category A with comorbidities or they belong to category B. The best way is to see whether the patient requires is hypoxic or not, whether the patient requires oxygenation or not. So if the saturation is anywhere above 94, then they fall into category A. If the saturation is below 94, ranging from 90 to 94, or needing up to 5 liters of oxygen, then they fall into category B. So in that way, we classify the patient as category A or category B. And please note, this is purely a clinical classification. You don't need any blood test or any great equipment to diagnose it. A simple pulse oximeter is sufficient to differentiate between the different categories.
But this oxygen saturation, doctor, like they start supposing a person is positive and has symptoms on a particular day. Is there any thumb rule that, the saturation, even if it falls to 92 or 91 within a day, or is it like something that usually happens only after 4 5?
Yeah, so we told you to monitor the saturation every 4th hourly. So that is the reason why, to see whether there is any persistent drop in saturation. So if your saturation is coming persistently below 94, say, and you check it now, you check it after 4 hours and again later on, if the saturation is persistently below 94, we categorize them as category B and they get needed to be in the hospital. If it's a one-off value which is there below 94, it is of no use, because many a times if your hands are cold, the saturation readings are not appropriate. So you should just warm your hands and then take the reading by the pulse oximeter. But a persistent value below 94 should be alarming and the patient should get admitted.
even as early as day 1 or day.
Yes, yes.
Another question about ivermectin 12 milligram tablet OD for 5 days in a mild COVID positive patient. They're asking, is it okay?
12 milligram OD for 0 days is what I would recommend. You don't need to take ivermectin at all. The only reason indication, as I told you, is if you are having steroids, maybe then 2 doses of ivermectin is useful. Otherwise, ivermectin is not at all useful and it should be stopped.
The next question is about, there is a lot of talk about how to increase your immunity during the pandemic. So there is an interest in many supplements, people take vitamin C or D or zinc or
Yeah.
turmeric capsules. So are they asked what is the ideal supplementation that is required in people who don't
So
have?
yes, so some studies have proven that certain vitamins are useful for COVID-19 infection, and those are especially vitamin C and basically a mineral which is zinc. So vitamin C and zinc in some of the studies have shown to be proven to be effective. But again, I told you there is no randomized controlled trial which has shown that vitamin C and zinc is valuable. There are some studies which show that high dose vitamin C can be used as a therapeutic agent. Again, there is no rationale to it. So what I would suggest, if you want to build up your immunity, have good food, have proper diet, have a regular exercise, keep yourself well hydrated, and if you want, you can take this vitamin C and zinc as a prophylactic agents. So these simple measures can keep your immunity high.
This also brings us to the question of, there's a lot of complementary and Ayurvedic and other alternative therapies, which of course we may not know much about because we are not in that specialty. But then there is also this, but do any of those things actually interfere with the working of some of the
Yeah.
Ayurvedic
So I
medication?
am not an Ayurvedic doctor. We practice the allopathy form of medicine, so it is not right for me to comment on the Ayurvedic treatment. But if your Ayurvedic medicines, some of the Ayurvedic medicines we know contains very heavy metals, and some of the Ayurvedic medicines can contain steroids. So if you're using those medicines which contain steroids or heavy metals, they are going to definitely affect you, and they may worsen your disease per se. So I think so without consultation of a proper registered medical practitioner, you should not consume medications on your own and get a proper advice and then take it.
Exactly. Even with Ayurvedic or other forms of medicine, I think you should take it from the right practitioner, not just buy it off the internet.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's just two, three more questions. Um, when do we have to do an antibody test?
Yeah. So antibody test as a routine test is not at all indicated for anyone. Antibody tests are indicated for healthcare workers like us who are basically exposed to the COVID-19 patients and we want to see whether are we immune or not. So if you have taken 2 doses of COVID vaccine, after that we are rest assured that the vaccine are effective and your antibodies would be produced. So you don't need to do a routine antibody testing at all. Some patients come to us who present much later after the COVID infection has subsided. And in those patients, many a times we do these antibody tests to see whether they really had COVID-19 infection or not. Because at those point of time, the RT-PCR comes negative. So if the RT-PCR is negative, but the patient still has certain symptoms, we can do the antibody test to just check whether the patient had this particular infection or not. But routine use of antibody test is not at all indicated for anyone.
Um, what are the medicines at the primary level of infection? You've already discussed, I think, vitamin and the paracetamol.
Yes, so paracetamol, cough medications like dextromethorphan, or maybe some bronchodilators with terbutaline and ambroxol. These are basically cough suppressants, cough expectorants, and paracetamol, and basically a vitamin C and zinc. These are the treatment only which is needed for mild asymptomatic cases.
The last question, doctor, is aspirin and a steroid combination, is it life-saving for a COVID patient?
Yeah. So there is no role of aspirin in basically the treatment of COVID-19 infection. When we talk about prophylactic or therapeutic anticoagulation, we are talking about the use of heparin. There is no role of antiplatelet agents at all. So aspirin as a therapeutic or a prophylactic agent is of no useful at all. If you're taking steroid because of hypoxemia, you can continue to use your aspirin. For example, if a patient is a cardiac patient, ischemic heart disease, who is already on aspirin and clopidogrel and now suffers from COVID-19 disease, there is no reason to stop aspirin or clopidogrel in these particular patients. The only indication to stop aspirin or clopidogrel will be if the patient is going to be on heparin for a long time. That is the only indication when we can stop these things, because already heparin is being used as an anticoagulation agent. So aspirin can be continued even if the patient is on steroids.
Viewers, if you have more queries, as always, put it on the comments section or send us a message on Facebook Messenger. Thank you, Doctor, for this wonderful discussion. And I think it was very clear that there are clear demarcations and categories. So I think now nobody should be having any more doubts about what treatment is required for each type or each kind of severity or category of COVID-19. Thank you so much. Viewers, have a good weekend. And let's meet on Monday, the 17th of May, same time. Now, we're going to discuss a very, very important and pertinent topic that affects all of us, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, fighting it with mental strength, and also discussing all the mental health issues that surround this pandemic that is kind of exerting such control over the entire world for the last almost more than a year now. So please join me at 2 o'clock on Monday to discuss this topic. Meanwhile, take care, be calm, stay safe, and don't forget that Apollo Kavach, Project Kavach, is always there to support all your COVID-19 requirements. And don't worry about anything, stay safe, but don't forget to SMS, which is socially distance, wear the mask, and sanitize. See you on Monday. Thank you. Goodbye.